British Railways unveiled 92220 Evening Star on March 18, 1960, as the last steam locomotive it would build. The ceremony celebrated an engineering achievement, but it also exposed a contradiction. Britain's ultimate heavy freight steam engine entered service 5 years after the modernization plan had pointed the railway towards diesel and electric traction. Evening Star was not an obsolete Victorian design assembled by habit. It belonged to the standard class 9F, a modern, highly capable fleet conceived for the hardest freight work. The class could move immense mineral trains, climb severe gradients, and, when circumstances demanded it, handle passenger work with deeply surprising speed. So why did British Railways build 251 examples of its finest freight steam locomotive while preparing to abolish steam? And why did Evening Star, preserved as a national monument from the beginning, work for only 5 years before withdrawal? The answer is not simply that dieselization arrived unexpectedly. The 9F emerged from a railway still dominated by coal. British industry, power stations, and households consumed enormous quantities, and moving that fuel required thousands of slow, heavy trains. British Railways needed a locomotive that could reduce journey times without imposing the axle load of an even heavier machine. Robert Riddles and the British Railways design team settled on a 210-0 arrangement. A two-wheel leading truck guided the locomotive into curves, while 10 coupled driving wheels spread its adhesive weight across 5 axles. Behind them came no trailing wheels. This was a machine whose geometry declared that traction came first. Its 5-foot driving wheels were small beside those of an Express Pacific. Small wheels helped convert cylinder force into a formidable nominal tractive effort of 39,667 pounds. 2 outside cylinders, Walschaerts valve gear, and a boiler working at 250 pounds per square inch formed a relatively conventional mechanism refined for demanding service. Yet 10 coupled wheels created an obvious problem. A rigid wheelbase that long would resist curves and punish both rails and flanges. The solution was carefully controlled lateral movement, thin flanges on selected coupled wheels, and a flangeless center driving pair. The 9F could therefore negotiate British railway curvature despite its intimidating length. That engineering compromise also explains why the locomotive cannot be understood merely as a giant engine. Every extra coupled axle improved adhesion and distributed weight, but increased the importance of alignment, wheel profiles, and track forces. The 9F's strength depended on managing the consequences of its own scale. The first member, 92,000, appeared from Crewe Works in January 1954. Production was shared by Crewe and Swindon, and the class eventually reached 251 locomotives. Most wore unlined British Railways black, an appropriately severe finish for machines intended to spend their lives among coal dust, mineral wagons, and industrial smoke. Their operating brief was not glamorous. A 9F had to start a heavy train without slipping, keep it moving over difficult gradients, and sustain useful speed once clear of congested yards. Faster freight mattered because a slow mineral train consumed scarce paths and delayed the passenger railway around it. This was where the class earned its reputation. The large boiler could supply steam steadily, the 10 driving wheels converted power into adhesion, and the relatively moderate axle loading allowed wide employment. The design did not make freight spectacular. It made an exhausting railway task more repeatable. If you enjoy locomotive history that tests a famous reputation against the engineering and operating evidence, like the video and subscribe, because the 9F's greatest surprise appeared when it escaped the freight timetable. A locomotive built for minerals began appearing on passenger trains. The best known work came over the Somerset and Dorset route between Bath and Bournemouth, where severe gradients and heavy seasonal trains demanded power. A 9F's small wheels looked wrong at the head of coaches, yet the class could perform the the duty impressively. This did not transform the 9F into an express design. Small wheels meant high rotational speeds when the locomotive ran fast, while the long-coupled wheelbase raised concerns about dynamic forces on the track. Its passenger appearances demonstrated reserve capability, not proof that freight and express engineering had become interchangeable. The distinction matters because the familiar story often turns the 9F into a secret passenger champion suppressed by cautious officials. The more revealing truth is better. British Railways had produced a freight locomotive with unusually broad capability, but its wheel arrangement still carried limits that competent operation had to respect. The class also became a test bed. 10 engines, 92020 to 92029, received Franco-Crosti equipment intended to recover heat from exhaust gases and preheat feed water. A second drum beneath the main boiler and an exhaust outlet beside the boiler gave these locomotives a visibly unusual profile. On paper, recovering otherwise wasted heat promised improved efficiency. In British service, the extra equipment brought complexity, dirty exhaust around the locomotive, and uncomfortable conditions when wind carried fumes towards the footplate. The expected economy was not sufficient to justify the penalties, and the engines were rebuilt towards conventional form. 3 more 9Fs, 92165 to 92167, received mechanical stokers. A screw carried coal forward from the tender, while steam jets distributed it across the grate. The intention was understandable. Sustained high output demanded punishing physical work from a fireman, especially when fuel quality was poor. Tests showed that a mechanical stoker could maintain a high delivery rate for longer than a person. But ordinary freight operation included signal checks, paving stops, and varying demand. Skilled hand firing remained effective during the shorter periods of maximum effort, while the machinery introduced its own losses and maintenance needs. These experiments reveal the real midpoint of the 9F story. British Railways was not merely perfecting a locomotive. It was trying to improve the entire steam system, fuel economy, crew labor, maintainability, and availability, just as another traction system was preparing to remove the firemen, boiler washing, and coal supply altogether. The 1955 modernization plan did not make every steam locomotive instantly redundant. Britain lacked enough new diesels, electric locomotives, depots, and trained staff to replace steam at once. Traffic still had to move during the transition, so building proven steam power could appear rational even when its long-term future was closing. But the transition was badly compressed. Diesel orders expanded, freight patterns changed, and the political determination to eliminate steam strengthened. A machine designed for a working life measured in decades entered a railway that would withdraw its final standard-gauge steam locomotives from regular British rail service in 1968. This is why construction date alone cannot prove that the 9F was a mistake. In 1954, British Railways required heavy freight capacity immediately. The alternatives were not a complete diesel railway or a new steam locomotive. They were an incomplete modernization program, aging inherited engines, and traffic that could not wait. The stronger criticism concerns scale and timing. Building 251 locomotives continued deep into a rapidly changing program. Their reliability and ability could not protect the investment when depots, coal stations, water facilities, and steam maintenance were being closed as a connected network. A steam locomotive does not survive economically as an isolated machine. It needs trained crews, fitters, boilersmiths, ash disposal, water, coal, lubricants, and planned overhauls. Dieselization could remove infrastructure as well as replace engines. Once that network contracted, even a young and excellent 9F became expensive to retain. Then came 92220. Swindon Works completed it in March 1960 and finished it in lined locomotive green rather than ordinary freight black. Copper-capped chimney details, its Evening Star nameplates, and ceremonial treatment made the final engine visibly exceptional before it had hauled a revenue-earning train. Its identity requires care. Evening Star was the last steam locomotive built by British Railways, not the last steam locomotive constructed in Britain by any builder. It was also the only member of the class named during British Railways service. Names carried by other preserved 9Fs were generally later additions. The ceremony at Swindon transformed 92220 into an artifact of national memory while it was still new machinery. A commemorative plaque recorded its status. The locomotive therefore began life under two incompatible expectations. It was expected to work hard, but it was already being treated as the closing exhibit of an era. Evening Star served on the Western region and worked freight and passenger duties, including trains associated with the route towards the southwest. Its green paint encouraged the passenger engine image, but beneath the ceremony, it remained a standard 9F, 2 outside cylinders, 5 coupled axles, and a heavy freight engineering purpose. Its British Railways career ended in March 1965. 5 years is astonishingly short for a major locomotive and shorter than the interval between many heavy overhauls in an earlier railway age. Yet withdrawal did not mean the engine had failed mechanically. The operating system around it had changed. Other members experienced similarly compressed lives. Some locomotives built in the late 1950s worked only 6 or 7 years. The class survived in British Railways ownership until 1968, but the fleet's capability could not reverse a policy designed to eliminate steam traction altogether. The withdrawal story can therefore be read backwards. The 9F was not discarded because British Railways discovered that 10 driving wheels could not pull freight. It disappeared because locomotive performance had ceased to be the controlling question. Fleet standardization, infrastructure withdrawal, and the pace of diesel conversion now decided survival. Preservation produced a different verdict. 9 9Fs survived, although they arrived by different routes. Evening Star entered the National Collection, while others were purchased directly or rescued after reaching Barry Scrapyard. Their survival rate reflects both the class's fame and the expanding confidence of the preservation movement. Preserved lines also make the 9F's physical argument immediately visible. A working example fills the landscape with a long boiler, 5 driving axles, and a tender, yet it can handle the tighter conditions of a heritage railway. That combination of intimidating size and controlled flexibility remains the design's most legible achievement. Preservation can also distort history. Several surviving engines have carried green paint or names they did not possess in ordinary British Railway service. Those liveries may attract visitors, but they should not be used as evidence that named green 9Fs were normal. Evening Star was the authentic ceremonial exception. Nor should heritage performance be treated as a laboratory recreation of 1950s freight work. Shorter trains, lower speeds, different coal, and modern operating constraints changed the task. What preservation proves is that the machinery can remain alive. Period records are still needed to judge what the fleet achieved commercially. The National Railway Museum's Technical Archive preserves test report groups for the basic 9F, the Crosty engines, mechanical stokers, and the Giesel ejector. Their existence is a useful corrective to legend. British Railways measured competing solutions because the class was a serious engineering program, not simply the last flourish of steam nostalgia. The experiments also prevent an overly simple verdict. Standardization did not mean refusing innovation. Engineers tried heat recovery, assisted firing, and alternative exhaust arrangements on a broadly successful platform. Some ideas failed, but failure inside a controlled trial is different from failure of the entire class. Which part of the 9F story changes your verdict most? Its freight performance, its unexpected passenger work, or the 5-year career of Evening Star? Choose one in the comments and subscribe for more British locomotive histories built around the machine, the railway, and the decision that connected them. The 9F ultimately succeeded at the assignment for which it was designed. It hauled heavy trains with power, flexibility, and a degree of standardized maintainability. Its short life was not an engineering acquittal of dieselization, nor evidence that steam could have defeated every modern alternative. Instead, it demonstrates the danger of judging a locomotive outside its system. The 9F was perhaps the finest answer British Railways produced to the heavy steam freight problem. Unfortunately for the investment, British Railways was already preparing to stop asking that question. Evening Star survives because people understood the symbolism before the machinery became old. Its green body and 5 coupled axles now embody both achievement and expiry. The final British Railways steam locomotive was technically mature, operationally useful, and historically doomed from the day of its celebration.